Welcome to another episode of the ongoing Kundalini Awakening series. I'm your host, Brent Spirit, and today I have with me Mel Hofmann. Hey, Mel, why don't you say hi to our audience before I give you a little introduction?
Okay, great. Well, I'm really glad to be here today with you, Brent. I've watched some of your interviews with other people, and they've been really wonderful. So
Oh,
thank you for inviting me.
great. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. We've got a lot to unpack today. Mel has over 50 years of experience with the Kundalini process. She's coming to us today from Berkeley, California. Is it Berkeley?
It's Berkeley.
Berkeley, California, from
Yep.
her art studio. You see in the background, there are some really interesting pieces of art. We're going to dive into all that today. We're going to talk about her awakening, which took place in her teenage years. She's got so much wisdom, so much experience, some ups and downs, some challenges, some solutions to offer us today. Mel is also an energy healer, as well as the author and creator of a really cool deck of cards to support you on your spiritual journey, the Sacred Journey deck. I may have messed up the name there, but I'll definitely get Mel to elaborate a little bit more and tell us all about it. So today we're going to talk about your journey, and we're going to see what comes out. There's some cool mystical experiences that Mel has had. She's had an experience of the void. She's had an experience very early on in her journey, spending time at the Ashram of Yogi Bhajan, one of the earlier gurus back in about the 60s, I think.
Yeah, I think he came here in 1968, and I was around that group in the early 70s.
Right, right. So way back, going back to some of the origins, you could say, of yoga coming to the West and sort of how it kind of took root and influenced. And, there's some interesting things that took place, but we'll get all into that today. Mel, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to stop rambling and I'm just going to give you the floor here. Why don't you take us back to those early days before Kundalini began to be a very clear and obvious experience in your life? What was going on for you? How did you find yourself experiencing these things? And go at your own pace, but bring us all the way up to today where you find yourself here in your art studio,
Okay.
sharing your message, sharing your energy. Let's get right
It's
into it.
yeah, it's a very long, complicated journey. But for some reason, one of the first things that came to mind was my memories of Ram Dass, actually, because Ram Dass and Yogi Bhajan were friends back then, as were a lot of the holy men, and there were very few women. And there was actually this event that took place in San Francisco called the Meeting of the Ways, and Yogi Bhajan was there, and Satchidananda was there, and Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach was there, Stephen Gaskin was there. All these people were there. And I was just a kid, basically. I was a teenager. And when I was about 15, I started taking Kundalini yoga classes in Berkeley. And they would hold them like at the Unitarian Church or at a rec center or whatever. And basically, it kind of led me into a period of time in my life where I was really spending most of my time with adults. I wasn't with my peers. I was very influenced by the teachers of Kundalini Yoga who were around then. And it was before everyone started to take on different names and started to dress in white and wear turbans and all the rest of it. So it was kind of that transitional period when people were basically kind of, normal or whatever. They hadn't like taken the Sikh vows. And so I never really got into that part of it. I was just in it when it was the Banana Ananda Ashram in San Rafael. And then I think by the time I left, the name had changed to Hargobind Saddam, named after Guru Hargobind. There were the whole lineage of Sikh gurus who had led up to, I don't know, I don't even remember all the details, but I remember them talking about Guru Nanak a lot and things like that. We would do the Ekam Kar Satnam Sri Wahguru mantra every morning. And At this point, it's hard for me to remember how long it was, but it was probably at least an hour every morning that I was doing this practice. And honestly, that is not normal behavior for a 16-year-old at all. I mean, I just was not on the same path as my peers. I think there was one other teenager who lived there at the time, but basically I was kind of it. And my parents had separated. My mother was still living in Berkeley with my brothers. And I was just like out in the world on my own with all of these adults. And despite the fact that it was called Kundalini Yoga, nobody ever really talked about what Kundalini was or what would happen if your Kundalini awakened. So when I'd been doing these practices intensively every day, doing the physical yoga, the breathing, the mantra, all of it, and I started to have these experiences, honestly, I didn't even know what was happening to me. I knew that there was energy. I knew that there was high vibration. I knew that it was moving through my body. But what had been described to me as Kundalini, being like a coiled snake at the base of the spine, and then, rising up through the central channel and through all the chakras and resulting in enlightenment, that was not really what I experienced. So I just thought I was basically kind of losing my mind, and maybe if I told anybody, they'd probably want to lock me up or something, because part of it was actually hearing voices. And it's like, you talk to people who are hearing voices and you think, well, there must be something really seriously wrong with them. And the way that I've always viewed it ever since then was that actually the reality is that there are these voices. I mean, like, I was probably hearing the voices of the people who used to live in this big mansion that the ashram was housed in, that hadn't, passed on into the light or whatever. And so instead they were, going after me and yelling at me and pinning me to the floor and driving me crazy. So when I hear about people hearing voices, I think, well, yeah, they're just tuned in. They can hear them, because I could hear them. I don't hear them anymore. I haven't heard them for many years. But part of that is because I very intentionally stopped doing the yoga, because I just thought, oh my God, I mean, if I keep doing this, I'm really going to go off the deep end. And it did lead to some really profound and interesting experiences, like the experience of falling into this just big, vast, dark hole that even at age 16, I could identify it as the void. And I don't know how I knew that it was the void, but it was this kind of, I don't know, there was a gentleness to it, a softness to it, kind of a free falling. Like, I've actually jumped out of an airplane as an adult, and it was not that kind of experience. It was like just sort of a, gentle falling into this blackness. And then the other really profoundly incredible experience was a morning when I'd been laying in corpse pose in the meditation room. And all of a sudden I was just like surrounded by this beautiful celestial music. I could tell that there were angels there. I could not see them, but I could feel them and hear them. They were playing harps, they were laughing, they were singing. It just felt like there was like an overflow of the angels going from the meditation room into the next room. And it was interesting because I didn't really feel like I was part of what was going on. Like, there wasn't a communication that was happening, but it was like just being surrounded in this presence. And then when I developed my cards, which are I can't remember if I said the name of them again, but anyway, it's Sacred Journey medicine cards. When I developed them, I have a card that's related to that experience. And because of it was just so profound, and it was so separate from the reality that I had experienced prior to living in the ashram. It was like, oh my God, somebody's here. Somebody is like showing up for me. And that was something that I didn't experience as a child. I experienced my parents as being very preoccupied with themselves and not really able to guide me or support me emotionally or even be a part of my life. So the presence of the angels was very, very profoundly special to me. But then the other point that I was making before about there just not being much support for what I was going through is that all of this didn't really make a whole lot of sense because I didn't hear about other people having these kinds of experiences, and it's quite possible that they weren't, because I've made contact with people that I knew back then in recent years, and apparently, at least for most of them, that kind of thing didn't ever happen to them. So they didn't have the sort of fear that I had because they weren't having that experience.
Right. This is pretty consistent with my limited experience with that lineage, Kundalini Yoga. They're all around the world, and anybody can attend a class today. They host regular classes, and I've been to some, and they will lead a group of 30, 40 people in some sort of breath work. And I remember sitting there saying, there's no way I'm doing any of this breath work. At this point, I understood the implications and what's possible and how powerful they are. But for the most part, people will do the breath work and nothing really significant will happen. But for a few of us, we can go down a path like you went down, and there's not much support. And I've spoken about this in an earlier segment of this Kundalini series, where the Western yoga approach talks about Kundalini awakening in a very lofty, sort of far out mystical thing that might happen, in 1,000 lifetimes from now. But when it actually starts happening to an individual, there's not a lot of support. The teacher can't really help you, and it's very, very difficult. It's very traumatizing as well. And I imagine this was maybe part of why you at some point left this lineage. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, I just stayed for 9 months. One school year, my last year of high school, I graduated 1 year early, and I did all independent study. So I was really mostly in the ashram that entire time. Actually, one thing that really hit me was that my roommate, I had an adult roommate. I don't even know how old she was, maybe 25 or something. And then one day she told me she was getting married, and the guy that she was getting married to, she just met him, and Yogi Bhajan had decided that they were going to get married. And I thought, oh my God, I can't stay here, or, I'm going to end up getting married to somebody I don't even know. Yogi Bhajan was not a stable person. He was not a good person. I did not like him. Unlike many people who kind of worshipped him, I felt very uncomfortable around him. And he tended to be very critical. He would get really upset just about simple things like the bathroom not being cleaned or whatever. God wasn't going to come into the ashram because the bathroom wasn't clean. I mean, I got this idea that there was this God who was judging us for every single thing we did. And none of that felt good to me. And then, of course, years later, I discovered that he was up to all sorts of other stuff that was really terrible. And yet, and yet people were staying with this group. I mean, I still have someone that I introduced to 3HO who's still in 3HO, which at this point, I mean, well, and for a long time, I mean, I pretty much view it as a cult, along with a number of other groups. So I wasn't like thinking those things when I left, but I was just thinking about myself and my life and what I wanted to do with my life. And it didn't include living in an ashram where there was a teacher who came to visit every once in a while and who would be yelling at us about pretty silly things, really.
Right. I'm really
the tip of the iceberg.
just the tip of the iceberg, you say. Yeah. I'm aware of some of these allegations. What the vibe I'm getting alone from what you're sharing is pretty telling as well. And what would you say to those who feel the need to have membership in a sort of organization with a sort of figurehead? There are some people who feel that this is necessary. Do you have any advice, any insight for them?
Well, I basically just feel like we have to be our own teacher or among peers, like the When Lightning Strikes group, which is where I came in contact with you. There's nobody like heading it, really. I mean, there's somebody who founded it and organized it, but there's not somebody who's saying, you need to be this way, you need to do these things, and then this will come to you. Because this energy, this healing energy, the way I see it, that arises or that descends, is part of all of us. It's not something that can be given to us by somebody else. Even though there are people who talk, about Shaktipat, and I actually did receive Shaktipat from Muktananda at one point, and I didn't feel anything. It was like nothing happened. Anyway, it's just I just don't think it's necessary, and it can even be harmful to be part of a group like that, because there's almost always a certain prescribed way that you're supposed to be. Like maybe you're not supposed to be gay, for example, which is one thing that Yogi Bhajan made very clear. It was not okay to be gay. And then I remember this guy that I just loved to stay with Jean-Pierre, and we would cook a lot together in the kitchen. And a number of years later, I ran into him on Polk Street in San Francisco, which is a very well-known gay area. And I thought, oh wow, that was what was really going on. I mean, Jean-Pierre was gay, and I loved him. And the fact that you can be in a group where you're not accepted for being who you are is a big problem.
Right. I completely agree. We all do definitely have the capacity to lead ourselves. There are benefits, of course, of seeking some sort of counsel, guidance, insight, and example from those who may be a little ahead of the journey than us, for sure. But when it becomes a fearful environment, when there becomes sort of insistent dogma, shaming, that sort of thing, these are signs to just get out. Just get out. For so many people, it's unfortunate they don't, pick up on those signs. Like you said, you had somebody you introduced, or I think you said that you introduced them, but many, many years ago, and they're still with this organization. I'm not sure what it is that causes people to stay despite being abused. Maybe they don't recognize there's abuse. Maybe they're getting some benefits. I'm not sure. But for our audience here, my intention is to give people back their power, to have people like you on that come and say, hey, this is my journey. This is my experience. This is the way that I see things. And I would love to have people on like you that have come from different walks of life to share this is a very, very diverse path. There isn't one way of doing these things, gay, straight, however you'd like to identify, however you feel within yourself. Nobody is not a candidate to awaken, to have Kundalini come and transform the entire system head to toe. I don't think anybody's, you know, um, not eligible. I think we all are. And anybody who tells you otherwise, you don't even have to waste your time getting upset. Just move on. That's my take on the matter. But I'll let you keep going with your journey. So you managed to sort of get out of this experience at this what you would call a cult, the 3HO with Yogi Bhajan. Where do you find yourself now? Are you still a teenager at this point?
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, I went into the ashram when I was 16. And when I was 17, I started college. I went to a community college called College of Marin, which is in Marin County, not far from here. And then transferred to an art school in Mexico, in San Miguel de Mexico, when I was 19. I didn't ever go back to my parents. I mean, to live with my parents, except after I came back from Mexico, I was not well, and I did end up living with my father for a while. There's so much that happened. I don't know if I really want to go into it because it could probably take us away from the topic at hand. I think perhaps where I would want to go next, even though it would leave out a big chunk of information, is to where the Kriyas
Yeah.
started. I mean, there were a lot of things that transpired in between, but the truth was, I pretty much wanted to shut the show down at age 16. I didn't want to be experiencing these things anymore because I didn't have anybody that I could talk to about it. And I didn't really even know that it was Kundalini or whatever. I didn't figure that out until the internet came online. But there was a point at which Kundalini basically came back into my life in a big way. And prior to that, I pretty much kind of like tried to put a lid on a volcano. you know?
Could I ask how you may have tried to do that? I know you want to speak about once the Kriyas began again, but was there anything in particular that you did to sort of shut this down?
Mainly it was stopping the yoga.
Okay.
Yeah, it was stopping any kind of practice like that. I'd been initiated into transcendental meditation when I was 12 by a teacher at this private school that I went to when I was young, and that's a whole other story. I mean, that place was a shit show too. So anyway, yeah, there's so many things that are just such a mixed experience because the school was like a free school in the 60s and we did all this art and all this creative stuff and everything. And yet there was also a lot of sexual abuse going on between the teachers and the students. And I mean, it was just a big mess. To this day, not everybody acknowledges that was what was happening. But it's kind of like the same thing with the ashram. I mean, on the outside, oh, you lived in an ashram, that's incredible and everything. But you're not really looking at, what's really going on. And I guess that's the point I've gotten to in my life now is that I just, I'm very discerning about what I want to get involved in or not get involved in. It's like, is this something that is going to nourish me and my family? Or is, and I just, gone through this week with deciding not to do something that I thought would be a really great thing. I just really learned how to figure out whether something is going to be a good thing or not. And anyway, getting back to the Kriyas, I had gone to this crystal fair here in the Bay Area, and there was a woman there who was giving demos of the Reconnective healing method. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll try it out. I'd heard about it and it sounded interesting. And then I ended up going to her for a session. And during the session, all of a sudden, like these spontaneous movements and vocalizations started happening. I'd never had anything like this happen in my life. And I thought, oh my God. I mean, I came there because I felt like I wanted to work with I had a couple of frozen shoulders, and it's an extremely painful condition, and I really wanted to heal my frozen shoulder. I wasn't thinking that I was going to reawaken my Kundalini, but that's basically what happened, and it got really intense. I mean, really intense. Like people would move their arm, and I would jump all over the place. The Reconnective healing training, which I took over a weekend, sometimes they would have more than one person work on me, and I would just start screaming. And that they're recording this thing, and I'll delete that part. And it was like all this, all this trauma that I had shoved down, in addition to the trauma of the initial Kundalini awakening experience, it was just coming out. Like, I mean, I would wake my wife up in the middle of the night, screaming and thrashing around. Just everything, was just coming up, and it wasn't necessarily easy or comfortable, but it was kind of like I had no choice except to work with it. And interestingly, it wasn't like that uncomfortable or that painful or anything. It was just like a process of releasing. And fortunately, I remarkably had been working with a therapist for years who I knew had had a Kundalini awakening because he told me about it. And so when I started having the Kriyas, I was able to work with them. And that really became an incredible resource for me. And it's interesting. We just worked together a few days ago, and he can feel in his system when a Kriya is coming. Sometimes even before I can, because I can usually feel when they're coming too. But it was an amazing experience to have someone like that to work with.
So when you first encountered the Reconnective healing, how old were you?
Okay, so let's see. I'm 67 now. So 10 years ago, about 57.
7. So for about, if my math is right, 40 years, you didn't really have much to do with Kundalini from the time that you were a teenager and you stopped with the yoga, and then it reawakened about 40 years later.
Right. No, I mean, I would talk about, like with my therapist, Dawn, who I've actually worked with for a really long time, I would talk about the trauma of living in the ashram and Yogi Bhajan, but it never occurred to me that I'd actually had a Kundalini awakening.
Right.
Until I started researching more and discovering that it didn't always show up the same way. Like the fact that I was feeling a high vibration of energy moving from my feet through the top of my head, and that I was becoming, paralyzed and unable to speak, because that was mostly what was happening back then. that was Kundalini. I didn't know that was
Yeah.
Kundalini, and until like it came back in the form of the Kriyas, which I did not have back then. It was sort of like a reawakening. It was like, oh, that's what's been going on all these years. And it was also just curious because um, some of the experiences that I've had in my life have just been so intense. And I've had like night terrors way into adulthood. I would wake up and I would like see somebody, standing over me. I mean, just things that didn't, that weren't common
Right.
for people to experience. And
So,
yeah, well, anyway.
so once you found the reconnective healing, you said that now things began to come up. There was like a purification, a sort of purging, emotional clearing experience happening, which of course we know is major theme, if not the main theme of the Kundalini process, which is this transformative healing that takes place. I really liked that what you said earlier, and I won't be able to repeat it word for word, but you said, some of the experiences were neither comfortable nor uncomfortable. I just understood that it was a process to be with these experiences. Can you speak a little bit more about this and maybe offer some wisdom to those that are in the midst of a very difficult emotional upheaval that's happening as a result of their spiritual unfolding? What can you say to them? What can you advise them? Give them some tools for that so that they can use when, they can't sleep because incredible emotional things are arising. What can you say for them?
Well, it actually took me a really long time to figure out what worked for me. There were certain things that really helped me, like in my therapy sessions, EMDR, and then also the EFT, the tapping, meditation. I've actually done quite a bit of meditation, silent meditation with my therapist. I just have to say that for me, at least, it's kind of gone, gone down into the dark night of the soul territory, into the depression, and then it's come back up again. And I mean, you could label that as, bipolar if you were going to label it with a psychiatric label. But basically, there are times in my life when it really doesn't matter what's going on outside. There's just this incredible peace and happiness. It's like everything is just in its place. And then I will go down into that, I don't, whatever you want to call it. I'm not really sure what to call it. But for me, it's manifested as a lot of sadness and crying, sometimes anger, irritability. And I guess what I found works the best is just to really go into it, really just go into the pain. It's like realizing how much pain there is. I mean, not only have I gone through trauma like sexual abuse and being raped and things like that, but our daughter's gone through trauma. My wife has gone through trauma, and it's painful. I mean, we're human beings and we feel things, and to just be with it and allow yourself to feel it is something that actually is not that common. People don't necessarily do that. They just kind of deny it and live with it and just go on as if, nothing happened. I guess that's the most valuable thing I've found, is just by allowing myself to really feel the feelings, to feel the pain, that there will be a point at which that peace comes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Really, that's been my experience as well. We're so inclined to avoid and escape and deny our feelings. So many opportunities to do that today. One thing I love about the spiritual journey is that the simplest things are usually what we're meant to do. And so if something is arising, like you're saying, the simplest thing, feel it, be with it fully, allow it to pass through, to have its voice within our experience of life. Let even the pain have a voice. And once it has its voice, it expresses itself, it's released, and there's a deep experience of peace. And I really love the way that you describe that peace. Everything is in its place. Really, I love that. Thank you. I know that people out there are going to listen and they're going to feel your wisdom, and this will encourage them to not run from their feelings, but to sit with it. Because, considering you've been through this journey, and a very, very intense journey, you're not here just giving lip service. You're not here just, giving us some cheap answers. This is real stuff here, right? This is real stuff that Mel is sharing with us. Just feel it. Give it permission to be in your space. Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's move ahead a little bit on your journey. So that was about when you said you were 57, about 10 years ago. So how's the last decade looked for you once you began to now work with the recognition that, okay, I'm in the middle of Kundalini process. Okay, I understand I've got to sit with whatever's arising because it's coming to heal. You've got a sense that deeper and deeper experiences of peace come as a result of the healing work that you do. So where do you find yourself after these insights are coming to you, after this understanding of the process is coming to you? Let us know what sort of themes begin to emerge for you.
Okay. Well, one thing that happened about 10 years ago was that I had been practicing as a massage therapist. And I actually got my massage therapy training when I was 23. And I also got my training in energy healing when I was 23, because the massage instructor had a good friend who was an energy healer. So all of that came very early in my life. And because of some issues with my hands, it's very common for people with type 1 diabetes, like I've had for, it's been, I think, 47 years now, to have problems with their hands. And it got to the point where I really literally couldn't do my work anymore as a massage therapist. And I had been thinking, what could I do? And I've done energy healing all this time, but people tend to be more drawn to getting a massage. So I started to see people just for energy healing. I think I got a little bit off track of your
That's
question.
okay. That's okay. Let us know about the energy healing. We're on the topic. Let's talk about it a little bit. So you began offering energy healing when your hands became a little, difficult to do the massage work. We can explore a little bit about why you think that might be, but let's just go into it. Do you think that might have been, divine grace, the flow kind of guiding you away from the massage work and into more energy work?
I do actually. Yeah, I mean, I ended up having surgery on both of my hands. So it was fairly extreme. And I think there was a part of me that was like, yeah, it's time. It's time to move into doing this work that I was trained for when I was really young. And my first teacher was a woman named Rosalind Briere, and I still use some of the techniques that I learned from her, although I've kind of gone in a different direction. But a really basic technique that she taught me was working with a pendulum and holding it over each chakra to see how the chakra is functioning. And I've discovered that most people are not completely online. They've got at least, one or two or three or four chakras that are not functioning. And what I learned from working with people is that it's actually, for some reason, very easy for me to unblock them and to open them. And generally speaking, I think that it's never not been the case. When I work with somebody, if there is a chakra that is closed or unbalanced in some way, they're always open by the end of the session. And it does lead to people feeling more relaxed, comfortable, safe, open. Maybe if there's been something that they've been really afraid of or concerned about, suddenly it will just lift and they'll be able to handle it. Sometimes people release emotion. Sometimes ancestors will show up with support. Sometimes spirit guides will show up with support. Sometimes even a pet that has passed will show up. I don't know exactly what it is with me specifically and what's going on, but there are a lot of beings who work with me. And some of the common companions that I have on these healing journeys actually come from Greek mythology, like Pegasus. Pegasus has been like my buddy for a long time. Mm-hmm. And then a Christ will show up. I feel this very powerful connection with him, and it's actually partly because of this trauma that I've experienced with my hands. I have this sense of sharing that experience of like being right. being across and all the suffering. There was a thought that came at some point, and I can't even trace it back to exactly when it happened, but there was something about the degree of pain that I've experienced, that there was some kind of gift in there, even though like if I had a choice, I would just not want to have experienced all of that, but that it just it has allowed me to open a portal, like a portal into communicating with these spirits that I work with, and to working with the clients that I've worked with in shifting their energetic patterns so that they're able to receive more of the gifts that they came here to work with, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And there have been some pretty extreme examples, like working with a young man who'd been in a serious motorcycle accident and who was in a coma, and working with his energetic system in a way that basically, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe he would have survived and maybe he wouldn't. I don't really know. But he did. He did survive. He did wake up. He did go back to college, did do all those things. And he was in a coma for quite a while. I don't remember how long it was, but it was maybe 6 weeks or something. Right. And then some people that I've worked with who've just been in an extremely emotionally difficult situation, facing something that like a legal situation or whatever that they were really troubled about, and then being able to walk into that situation with more of an ability to deal with it.
Right. It's fascinating stuff. Do you work with people who sometimes have Kundalini experiences? Either they come to you already having those experiences, or they come to you and they begin to have them. Is there a Kundalini theme with some of the way that you work as well?
Sometimes there is. Yeah, sometimes there absolutely is. I did yeah, I did work with somebody who shortly thereafter did start to have Kundalini experiences that he hadn't had before. But I can't say that I had anything to do with it. I don't really know. I mean, it just kind of happened that way. There's a woman I know who was originally from India, and she had her sister come to me, and when I was working with her sister, I kept seeing these cobras. And actually, when I did that little meditation with you at the very beginning, I saw a cobra as
Cool.
well. I don't know if that means anything to you, but um, so yeah, sometimes the Kundalini will show up in the form of a snake.
Right. Yeah, that's very common for me as well. The snake presence, sometimes in physical manifestation of the animal, the snake, sometimes a symbology, sometimes a vision, but there's sometimes a dream. Snake's very common for me, as I know for many that experience Kundalini phenomena. It's interesting that you mentioned that there was somebody who was working with you and then later on began to experience Kundalini phenomena. I had a friend who was really sick, and we had asked an energy healer to give him some healing, and it was a bit of like you know, we'll try anything at this point sort of thing. And just being in her presence was I could feel something very palpable. And this was prior to my own Kundalini rising, you could say. And it was around the same time that we were having these regular meetings with her treating my friend that I had my own rising. And for a while I thought, this lady had a big part in this journey for me. And I still feel that she did for sure, but looking back, there was many things leading up to it, and she was just like one of those pieces. But definitely I feel that when you come into the presence of somebody like yourself who's aligned, who's got the Kundalini flowing, who's been on this journey for a while, and if you're open and receptive by osmosis, this is contagious. We all begin to experience something a little higher frequency, you can say. We don't necessarily need to call it a full-blown Kundalini awakening, but there's definitely something palpable, energetic, that we can feel it when we encounter those who have, established themselves in the way that you have, developed your skills as a healer, as a transmitter. And I can feel that from you just sitting with you here, even though we're on a video call, right? Thousands of miles apart, but I'm feeling it. And it's very powerful. So thank you for sharing that energy with me, and for all those that are out there listening as well. So if you would tell us a little bit, towards the end of our call, I'm going to get you to really send people where that they can connect with you. But do you offer energy healing? Is it only in person? Do you offer remote healing as well? Can people that are listening, if they're interested in working with you, is that something that you offer?
Yeah, actually, I mean, obviously, many of us who used to do everything in person don't do that anymore because of the pandemic. But yeah, I work remotely, and I've actually found that even with checking the chakras with the pendulum, that it works just fine remotely.
Cool.
My preference is to work with people in person because it's just I just really enjoy working with people in
For
person.
sure.
I just enjoy it, but that doesn't mean that it's not equally as powerful online. It's a different experience. I find myself working more with my voice and with guiding, whereas in person it's more of a physical, I don't know, or energetic experience.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you work within your own sort of modality or approach that is maybe a combination of multiple different modalities? Or is it one specific modality that you offer?
Honestly, at this point, I don't even know anymore. Yeah, a lot of it is intuitive. A lot of it has to do with the person I'm working with and what their needs are. Um, but yeah, I mean, in terms of skills, I studied with Rosalind, and she's actually also an interesting person. She's a trance medium. Like she goes completely out of her body and has other beings come in. I've studied, let's see, reconnective healing, vortex healing, Reiki. I mean, I've done all these things, but I can't say that I do any one of them specifically. It's more what somebody needs. I guess the interesting thing about reconnective healing, separate from the rest of them, is that it doesn't involve any physical contact. The work is done in the field, and for some reason, for me personally, working in the field is actually more powerful in some ways. There's also a technique that I don't know how to do, but it's biofield tuning, where they work in the field with tuning forks. And it's always surprising to me how strong the energy is and how powerful it is, even though maybe the person is out beyond. You know?
So when you say in the field, can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by in the field as opposed to physical contact?
Well, I mean the energy field, the aura. Well, actually, if you go back to when I was 16 years old, I remember going to this Tantra course with Yogi Bhajan, and he would have us like doing these poses where we would hold our arms out and, you know, look into each other's eyes for like an hour or something like that. Well, I started seeing all kinds of things, you know, in that state. And, you know, one of it was the you know, the aura, the energy around the body. I don't think I see the whole picture, but I can see colors. I can see, you know, energy. It depends on what kind of space I'm in. But yeah, I'm talking about the energy field that we
Right.
around us.
Very cool. I like the way that you said, you know, you work intuitively based on your own inner guidance. And that goes back to our original thing that we were exploring here, where we don't necessarily need to pledge allegiance and loyalty to one particular system, guru, organization, tradition. Even when it comes down to the healing work, you're relying on your own intuition, right? There's something innate within you that knows how to navigate. Of course, we seek the value that's offered, you know, from different systems and trainings and all that sort of stuff, and it's great. But if I can say, I feel like that is, if we stick to one of those boxes, we become limited. But the intuition, our own inner intuition, our inner guidance is unlimited, and so we can become very creative in those ways. And as you're describing here, it seems like something, you know, that's surpasses all categorization and labels comes through and inspires you to do your work. It's very fascinating stuff. And this is, would you say that these capacities to heal come to everybody that undergoes a Kundalini awakening and becomes, you know, relatively established and stable? Do you think everybody has some ability to heal? Is that a sort of universal thing, you think, or do you think that there's not everybody that's meant to be a healer in their own way?
You know, I honestly don't know. I think part of my problem is that I've lived in this reality for so long that I don't really know what is typical or normal, or I really don't know.
Right.
I mean, I've had over almost the past year a connection with a group in Berkeley that works with people in the homeless community. And I made a connection with one particular person who actually ended up living in the shelter, and we talk on the phone almost every day. We're really good friends. And you know, when I'm with him, I think, oh my God, you know, he was like this person, you know, sleeping on a piece of cardboard, going to the store to buy alcohol first thing in the morning. And now he's got like 3 years sober. And even though he's like, you know, doesn't have a lot of money, he's living in a shelter, he still has this presence. I mean, this incredible presence. And I think that it's just something that some people just have as a result of sometimes having gone through this tremendous ordeal.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you can't really teach somebody how to have compassion, but clearly, if they've gone through a major struggle like he has, you just naturally develop that.
Right. Right. Yeah, I was just curious about your take on that idea that, you know, the Kundalini journey may or may not make us all healers in our own way. I was just wondering because, you know, we see you're in your studio there, and there's sometimes ideas that Kundalini will make you like a creative genius, an artist, a healer, all of these things. And I'm still not sure. I'm not sure if that happens to everybody. I think we all have different sorts of dispositions and different themes that sort of emerge. And the healer, the artist, these are sort of some of the more common ones that we see. But I think there are some more incognito themes, I would say, that sort of emerge. People just become, like you said, you know, just very present. Their presence radiates. And, you know, they're not necessarily doing energy healing, but there's just something about them when, you know, when you encounter them, they're very, very present. And that makes everybody around them very present as well. You know, it's contagious. But on that note, tell us a little bit about your art and how that ties in with your spirituality, with your spiritual journey. I believe you mentioned earlier that you've been an artist for probably, you know, your whole life. Is that true?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I have a picture of myself at the easel in nursery school. Thanks to my dad, who was also an artistic person. Well, it's just something that I've always loved, the creative process. And in my case, I really enjoy more experimenting as opposed to having a specific idea in mind of what I'm going to come up with. And I've also been taken away from it for pretty big chunks of time of my life. I mean, there was a time when I talked about going to Mexico to go to art school. Well, when I was in Mexico, there were so many tragic, difficult things that happened that when I came back, I just thought, oh, well, you know, maybe it's not safe to be an artist. And it took me until I was like 35 and pregnant to get back to it, to go to art school again. And then I majored in textiles. I have these big fabric pieces behind me that I did back then. It just felt like there was something unsafe about doing the art, and so I just didn't do it. And then when I got into it again, it was like just rediscovering this part of myself. And I went through a soul retrieval process with this woman who did like drumming journeys, and then it would go away again. It's like I would lose confidence. And I think part of it is just that this particular world that we live in is not necessarily conducive to being an artist. It's not valued in the way that some other things are. And so it can be just a very, frustrating process, just the whole marketing thing. Anyway.
Right. No, I can relate.
A bit off track there, but I'm sure you can relate. I mean, I know that you do photography, so.
Yeah, I can totally relate. It's a very challenging path to take to be an artist. It's very different than, any other job, right? You're
Right.
battling with yourself, your own insecurity. You're battling with, like you said, the market. Is it sustainable financially speaking? Of course, there's passion, there's joy, but can you keep the lights on by doing this? All these questions arise. There's a lot of imposter syndrome, all sorts of things arise. But then conversely, there's also the incredible joy that you feel when you enter the flow and something takes over you to bring that art forward. I heard it was a while back, but about the pandemic, somebody had posted saying, artists aren't always appreciated. They aren't maybe always considered. Sometimes you might question their pricing. But just remember that when the world shut down during the pandemic, each one of us turned to artists for comfort, for entertainment, to give us something to do. We all watched movies, we listened to music, we spent time consuming art, and that's what saved us. In a way, you could say it's one of the things that saved us. It was interesting that I thought, and it's true. When things are going great, we don't always acknowledge the artist as you think they're a crazy person, but they're the first people that we turn to when there's, nothing to do. We consume art. So tell us a little bit about your artistic process. You said you like to experiment. Do you go into sort of channeling state? Do you get visions? How does your artistic process unfold?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I guess one example that I can give you is I've done a process called visual journaling, where I work on these pages with images, and I've done all kinds of things in here. But anyway, that was not just the art, but it was also a group that met every week to do art together. And then we would share our work and comment on what others' art brought up within us, rather than looking at it from just an aesthetic viewpoint. And that process of visual journaling actually led into creating this deck, because I actually used the art from the visual journal pages as the background for the cards.
Cool. So tell us about the cards. How are they meant to be used? Or is there a very specific way to be used them? Can they be used intuitively? Tell us a little bit about how it came about.
Well, it was an interesting process, and I have told this story before, but at one time I was seeing a diviner who works with a process called stick divination, and it comes from the Dagara people of West Africa. And I've gone to see this person quite a few times, actually. And in one session, it was, I think in November of 2016, he told me that the spirits were telling him that I needed to create this deck of cards. And that he saw me working specifically with groups of people with these cards. That's actually started to happen recently. I've been hired to do some events, like a private concert, a Halloween party, a high school graduation, and I have a holiday party coming up. Well, I'll be giving readings. But basically, that the nature spirits were telling me to create these cards, and in that tradition, they're called the Wedame. Anyway, it's like I never thought about creating a deck of cards. I mean, what is this all about? But then I thought, wow, I have this resource. I have this whole big stack of journals, and I also have all my photography that I've been taking for years, and I could put those two together to create the cards. And I specifically didn't do a lot of research to figure out what other people were doing or saying, or whatever. I was not a card reader, so I didn't have a background in that. And I just allowed the deck to kind of create itself with me. And what I came up with is it's not anything I've ever seen before. Like the back of the card, it has, as you can see, bee on it. And in the case of the bee, I had done a couple of other designs for the back of the card, but they didn't feel quite right. And I consulted with a friend who said, I think you really need to do something different. And then I was out walking our dog after a therapy session, and I asked in my mind about a bee. Do I need to put a bee on the back of the card? And then I looked down on the pavement, and there was a bee. So I just took a picture of the bee with my iPhone, and here it is.
Cool.
That was kind of how the process happened. I mean, it wasn't anything logical or thought out or anything. It was just a process. So anyway, I could just draw a card and see what comes up.
Sure.
Okay, so I got this. I realize that there's some light reflecting, but I got this card called Deep Dive. And Deep Dive is a combination of that art that I was talking to you about in the journals with photography. And in this case, it's a fluke from a humpback whale. I really enjoyed going out with my wife and going whale watching and experiencing that whole thing. So this is the little booklet that goes with it, and the idea of writing the messages was like a completely foreign concept. I hadn't really written much of anything anytime recently, but I actually ended up finding that process was kind of a channeling experience as well. And I don't know if you want me to read this or not, but it's
For the
fairly
card?
short. It's a little short.
Yeah. Give us the reading for that card.
Okay, so, and it's actually relates to what we've been talking about,
Of course.
obviously. Okay. You plunge deep into the ocean where you encounter a whale. With it, you move with grace. Here you have the ability to navigate the depths of your emotional being. This is a power animal full of igniting wisdom, spiritual awareness, and enduring love. It taps into ancestral DNA and helps you to hear the whisper of truth within you. With whale energy, your life unfolds in ways that can address your deepest emotional needs and allows you to communicate with your authentic emotional experience. The world above the water remains to be explored with different senses once you return to the surface. Grab a hold of the whale's tail with certainty and allow her to move you deep into your own profound intuition.
Powerful.
So for me, when I hear that message, I find myself going into that deep dive, into that journey, into those emotions, and then that whole process of coming back up into the realm where we experience it with different senses.
Right. Great. Yeah, that's just echoing your earlier message about just feeling those difficult emotions as part of the purification, as part of the healing process that Kundalini, drives, right? And that's a very, very powerful card. I don't do much of any card reading at all. I think maybe I've sat down for a reading once at like a yoga retreat or something, just see what happens. It's not really something for me, but that was really powerful, and I should look into it a little bit more. You said that those messages, the meaning behind each card came to you in a sort of channeling type of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a little bit about your process when it comes to channeling? I spoke a little bit about channeling in another part of the series in conjunction with Kundalini, in conjunction with what I would conceive of as the muse, the goddess, Kundalini Shakti, the divine mother, the creative force. Do you feel that relationship with this feminine creative force when you enter into a channeling state, or when you bring something forth, or say, for example, when you're guided to see that bee on the cement? Do you feel that's the divine mother pushing you along?
Let's see. I don't think I've really specified it to that degree. I think I more just look at it as as that intuition, as that knowing. Um, and sometimes there may be um, it may be Kundalini, or it may be some other energy. Like, oh, I can. One example is I was feeling. Well, I was just pondering the fact that perhaps when my Kundalini initially awakened, that it did not go up the central channel, that it perhaps went up another channel. And I was like exploring this idea. And it's somewhere in that period of time, I had this little key fob on my keychain with an image of Saraswati. But I had mistakenly thought that it was Lakshmi because, I didn't really know that well. And then my friend Rajni informed me that it was actually Saraswati. And then I had this idea, oh, well, maybe, my Kundalini went up the Saraswati channel instead or whatever. So it's like sometimes these things will come into my life, in the form of a key fob or whatever. And they're like speaking to me. They're giving me information. But sometimes it'll take me a little while to put it all together. Like maybe I've been carrying this thing around for a long time, and then suddenly I realize, oh, she was trying to give me a message. So in my case, I feel like it comes from a lot of different sources.
Right, right. That makes sense. Yeah, it's similar to my experience as well. I've got, different connections and encounters with deities from all over. And then there's the overarching theme where it's just, like you said, it's just intuitive. These aren't necessarily beings that are separate from ourselves. There's something that we share with them, which is part of our own intuition, our own innate wisdom, you could say. Really fascinating stuff, Mel. So we're coming towards the end of our call here today, our interview, our conversation. And I really want to thank you for sharing so openly about your journey, sharing openly about some of the difficult parts of it as well, some of the solutions you found. So there's a lot that you shared that will really validate a lot of our listeners, let them know that Kundalini, like in your experience, isn't necessarily this very clear, simple experience of it rising from the root up to the crown. It can happen in all different directions, different degrees of intensity. It can stretch over very long periods of time, right? It's important to understand that for many who might feel, I'm having some sort of spiritual experience, but it doesn't fit this or that model of Kundalini that I saw in, a book, for example. Well, Kundalini is very, very diverse and dynamic experience. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I really appreciate that. Now, for those who are interested in connecting with you to see some more of your work as an energy healer, maybe they'd like to make an inquiry about connecting with you for a session, either in person, if they'd like to meet with you out in Berkeley, or remotely, I guess, over video call, over Zoom, where can they connect with you?
Well, I have my own website, and it's actually my name, Mel Hofmann. And the only thing you have to remember is that Hoffman is spelled with one F and two N's. That's often misspelled. I don't know why, but I was born a Calhoun with two O's, and then when I got married, I got Hoffman with one F and two N's. It's not the typical spelling. Yeah, and then I also am on Instagram, and on Instagram I have a link tree, and the link tree goes to a number of different places, including my YouTube channel, which I've put videos on for quite a while, and links to other podcasts, things like that.
Great. Great. Okay. So the links will all be in the description. All the links that Mel mentioned, they'll be in the description. You can check them out. For those who would like to grab one of your decks, the link will be in the description as well. Those are for sale, I'm assuming.
Yeah, my decks are for sale, and they're only for sale on my website. I tried out Amazon briefly, and basically they just took half my money, so I figured it wasn't worth it. Um, one dream that I've had is to have them published with a traditional publisher, but these days it's not as easy to get things published. So I just publish them myself.
Right on. Yeah, it's things are a little different now with publishers than they used to be. But
Yes,
thankfully we can make our own website, have our own store and sell the things that we want our way.
right.
And, the majority of that will come back to us to allow us to continue doing our work. Okay. And how about your art? Some of your pieces. I see that you're wearing a shirt. I believe that's inspired by an actual art piece that you've created.
Yeah, actually, this shirt that I'm wearing, I can tell you a little bit more. Oh, I I hooked my insulin pump up to the charger.
Oh,
It just fell off my lap. Anyway, so yeah, it's a
awesome. Great, great. That's really cool. Yeah. So t-shirts and things like that are also available on your website too.
yeah. Actually, there's menswear that features my art as well as women's wear and anywhere in between, however you identify. Um, I also sell my paintings. I sell prints of my work, including some photography. Um, there are a wide variety of things available. I can actually show you if I tilt this a little bit. There's a curtain on the window. I also sell those. Um, I have a lot of a lot of variety.
Great.
A lot of yeah, and of course I've been in this field for a long time, so I've moved from textiles to photography to video to painting. So I've done a lot of different things.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, Mel. For those interested in supporting Mel and getting some of her art for yourself, check out her website. All the links will be in the description. The deck of cards too, really cool stuff. And of course, for those who feel called to benefit from some of Mel's energy healing gifts, connect with her. I'm sure that there'll be some great things that unfold for you on that front as well. Mel, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing. Really appreciate your time here. On behalf of all of our listeners, thank you. Thank you very much. We really, really are so grateful. And for those out there listening, thank you so much for your attention as well, for sitting with us today, enjoying this conversation with Mel. I appreciate you. If you'd like to support this work, you can make a donation to keep these interviews going, to keep this series going. You can find out more about that at brentspirit.com. You can also stay tuned for the next part in the ongoing Kundalini Awakening series. We've got some more stuff coming. Right now, I don't know what it is, but we're not done yet. There'll be some more. If you've got somebody else like Mel who's wise, who's established themselves in a point of stability, who's ready to speak about their Kundalini process, connect them with me. I'd love to have them on the show. And once again, thank you, Mel. Thank you so much. We'll stay in touch. And until next time, much love.
You're welcome. I really appreciate you being here as well. And there was a silent partner that I didn't mention, and that's our little dog, Andy, who's been sitting in the corner of this entire time.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. I've got a silent partner. That's a dog as well. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mel.
Thank
And
you.
we'll keep in touch. Okay.
All
Much
right.
love and peace.